Today on Between the Lines, a prescription for living a life well lived with my guest, the renowned neuroscientist, Dr. Peter Whybrow. Welcome, I'm Barry Kibrick. Dr. Whybrow is the Director of Neuroscience for the Semel Institute at UCLA. With his book, The Well-Tuned Brain, he demonstrates that when we better understand the workings of the mind, it not only leads us to a more rewarding life, but benefits the overall progress of humanity as well.
I'm a writer today because I was a reader when I was 11 years old, and it was...
You do not need to prove your state of happiness to anybody.
Most of these speeches were as much as a month in preparation.
Characters, the heroes in this book, are seekers of truth in a story that involves a lot of
I
corruption.
don't get a chance to really talk about what's real, and it's the perfect for me.
Dr. Whybrow, thank you so much for joining us again on Between the Lines. It's always a pleasure to have you here on the show.
My pleasure too. Thank you very much.
Now, this is the third of a trilogy. I know I had you on for one of the three.
Right,
I forgot.
right.
I think it was America Mania. I'm not even sure myself. But what it is it's your thesis here, I might say, or premise, but it's more than a theory because you've looked at it. We know this is true. But it is how neuroscience itself and the discoveries that we're making about the mind will not only help us as individuals with this information, but your belief that it will literally help transform our society as well.
I think so, yes. I think the thrust of the idea is that as we learn more about ourselves, as you said, this informs us in ways that we hope will help us create a more egalitarian and vibrant society. So, people sometimes say to me, "What's this book about?" And I say, "Well, it's a mystery story." And they say, "A mystery story?" Yes, it's a mystery story because it's a mystery to me why, because we know so much now about ourselves, we don't do better than we do.
Well, you say it's because we're out of tune, and I swear to you, you can feel that because I just had the same conversation because we were discussing your book, and I said, it is amazing that we have this knowledge, we have this information. What we're lacking, though, is the wisdom to turn it into something productive because there's no way we should be on the course that we're on.
I agree absolutely. In fact, it's, whether it's an issue of political will or what it is, I don't know, but we're definitely not on the best course we could be on. And so this book takes an optimistic slant. It says, with the last book, America Mania, was really about how we managed to be so productive here in this country. And we've done an enormously wonderful job in creating a material society which is potentially generative for everybody. And yet somehow we've gone off course. And so this book says, we can get back on course. This is an optimistic sequel to American Mania, basically.
Well, part of it is, too, as you say, some of it has to do with just the sheerness of things, the sheerness in size of government, of business, and you use Adam Smith in here as the root of the capitalist and free market idea, along with his other book, The Moral Sentiment, which we'll talk about, because what made his theory during that Enlightenment period so important was that it was due to the goodness of the quality of man and his will for himself, the individual, but for his community, that we were able to have it, but we were more connected when he came up with that. Yes. And part of it is this feeling that we're not as connected. On one level, we may have never been as connected as we have, but on another level, we're distant.
Well, that's why I'm fascinated by history. To me, America is the great experiment. It's all the 18th century philosophers, of which the founding fathers were so familiar. They were the ones who really crafted our Constitution and our vision of the future. And in those days, as you just pointed out, you had very brilliant people like Hume and Smith and others who recognized that we're rather self-interested and greedy, and we like the short term, and they understood the way the core brain of the human being works, but they were also very optimistic about the social interaction and felt that because we were able to connect with each other, and we cared for each other. You know, Smith's wonderful talk about his brother, you know, being on the rack. He says, it's one thing to be sympathetic, but if you can understand what it is for your brother to be on the rack or to be in torture of some sort, then you have empathy for him. You can put yourself in that place, and then the society begins to work together. So that which was there in those days was much more an organic interaction of people than it is today. Even though we have lots of technology to help us, I don't think we're as connected.
But one of the things, and you mentioned our founding fathers, and I did a lot of work with Ben Franklin and the virtues that he wanted to, and a lot of work with Washington, and also his desire for character. And one of the things that even Smith talks about, and then Ben Franklin, Washington, and the founding fathers, was this craving to be virtuous, to be the best that you can be, to develop your character. So not only can you fulfill your self-interest, but your self-interest, even according to Smith, was that you'd be liked by your fellow man.
Right.
And they were very aware of that, how they carried themselves, how they spoke, how they wrote, how they thought. And like you said, we can bring that back. There's no reason why, because our minds are even more attuned, more enlightened than ever before.
Well, we know how that works now. You know, we have a pretty good understanding about how character develops now. So if you think about, which is one of the roots of the book, if you think about the market society, which is the culture that drives us, it works basically along the lines that you were just talking about. The engine of the market society is self-interest and curiosity and social climbing. Basically, that's what we all want. That's the fundamental survival techniques of being human or being any other animal. But what we're able to do, which is very different, is we're able to create these extraordinarily complex social interactions. So the market works on the basis of the drive, which is the engine of self-interest, and what Smith used to call social sympathy, which is the brake. And what we've tended to do is, as we've become more successful, is we've goosed the engine and forgotten the brakes, because suddenly the whole thing is out of line and the engine is roaring and we don't know how to stop it, basically.
Well, I loved your line when you said we were surprised by our affluence.
Yeah.
It caught us off guard. Our success literally caught us off guard, and now we have to catch up to our own success in a certain way.
I think in a certain way that's true. You see, because if you think about what are the tasks of life, first of all, we have to better understand ourselves, yes? And most of us think that we spend most of our time consciously thinking about the world and making conscious decisions, whereas in fact the reality is, as I talk about in the book, that we're about 80% driven by habit. It's not habit in quite the same way as Freud felt it was, which is a sort of nasty unconscious that you have to keep nailed down under the floorboards in case it might destroy your life. It's more that most of what we do is learned at a very early age, and in that learning comes a whole set of ideas and thoughts which carry forward into our adult life. So if we don't pay attention to the childhood period of human rearing, we end up with folks who really do not know, as Adam Smith talked about it, self-command. You know, they understood everything in those days, even as well, better than perhaps we know now. But the idea that the most important task of childhood, which is based upon, first of all, love and trust, is to teach the child not only self-command, but also some sort of concentration, some sort of precise attention that enables them to do the things in life that they want to do. If you can create that in the course of the 10 years that it takes from being born to coming into adolescence, then you will have a complete human being. You have a well-tuned brain, in other words.
One of the things that put us back on the right path, according to you, are these 5 universal templates of mind. And if we would adapt them, it's caring, fairness, loyalty, respect, and impurity. And what happened is, like you said, we kept the engine running, but we didn't keep thinking about those things that Smith, that Franklin, that Washington, that everyone said you must keep in mind with as you go forward. Because even if production continues to increase, even if the market continues to increase, as long as we go back to that empathy and can relate to our brothers and sisters' pain, then we will be much more, if we are with the right virtue and character at least, much more attuned to being able to, I don't want to say even the scales so much as equal the opportunity again, because it's almost as if we've knocked out even the opportunity at this point, and we want to bring that back into play for certain, at the very least.
Yes, it's not really very complicated bringing folks into lines that you're talking about, but it is the character that glues the society together. So if you think about it, once you realize that fundamentally human beings are self-centered, as I said, and greedy, then the question is, how do you improve the braking system? And the part of the brain that does deal with self-command is just a small part which has grown over the last 80,000 years, probably something like that, the frontal lobes, and that is what makes us particularly human. And we know that the way in which we can shape that ability to command oneself is very simple. It's actually the loving parent, which translates into trust. The child then translates the love into trust and begins to trust the parent. Within the trust, the individual then begins to learn things about the world, employs their intelligence and their curiosity. The playfulness of that then begins to allow them to explore the way in which things are in the real world, as opposed to just in our tablets and our computers. And then from there, what you end up with is the opportunity for the child to really learn in school. That continuum has been fragmented in modern life in a way that I think is potentially very detrimental to the individual, and because it's detrimental to the individual, it becomes detrimental to society.
And you even say then it also becomes detrimental to our own imagination, and then our own creativity. So when that occurs, we are even, we're less ready to re-innovate, recreate, and create and innovate. Both of those things occur when we're in this state. I don't want to call it morose, but almost, it's, you know what it is? It's almost the state of not following the golden rule. It sounds so, it's almost too, like you said, it's almost that simple. You know, you treat the people like you'd want to be treated. You don't treat the people like you don't want to be treated.
Yeah, manners are what glue the whole society together. You know, and the other wonderful thing about imagination, which is, by the way, another very peculiar human trait. I mean, the fact is, as I talk about in the book, Hobbes, another philosopher a little earlier than the ones we've been talking about, he said very perceptively, a dog can see a horse, you know, a dog can also see a man. But there's no dog that we know of anyway that can create a centaur by combining a horse and a man, yes? Because the imagination that human beings have, which we see in the cave paintings of 30,000, 40,000 years ago, is in fact the essence of our life, being able to connect the past with the future. And it's that ability to do that which has created all that we see around us. And so how could we harness that in a way that is just not entirely focused upon making money? If it were to be focused on things beyond that, to creatively educating our children, for example, I think we would be better off. And I talk a lot about that in the chapter on education and schooling. There's another chapter on how can we build our cities in ways where people actually have a wonderful opportunity for interaction, because it is this interaction which will create the braking system that will then put us in a balance again. Because what's really happened to us is we've lost the balance between the driver and the brake. And if we can put that back together again, then I think the society will begin to heal. And it's happening all over the country. It's not as if we're completely destitute. I mean, there are all sorts of pockets of change which are occurring that I think will eventually coalesce, and we will create something that is sustainable and will be very different from what we have at the moment. The linear nature of our society at the moment, where everything has to keep growing, everything has to get bigger, it's a prescription for self-destruction. As a physiologist and a physician, I know that. You can't have systems that run away. You have to have systems that actually feed back upon themselves and are their own braking system, which is what ironically, Smith's original concept of the market was exactly that. We've forgotten it.
Well, you know, you say this line, and I think this is something that we've also forgotten. And it says, and these are your words, in human societies, the transactional and the transcendental are inextricably intertwined.
Yeah.
And when we forget that, because that's what we're talking about, what is it that the material is easy to see, it's the transcendental.
Right.
It is go back to the character, the virtue, the empathy, the golden, all those things. If we don't, then that's why we are out of balance. Am I correct? That's what throws us off balance, is that we only have the engine moving in one direction and we don't have
Well, we've confused material progress with progress itself, with human progress. I don't think they're equivalent. I mean, for example, the mystery of human life has not really been solved. Nobody really knows why we're here. And so we have created all sorts of ideas about that, but somehow we've become phobic of the mystery. It's almost as if you get a larger television set, that's going to solve the problem. It's not. It's the mystery of human life is one of the most fascinating things. And thinking about who we are is also very fascinating. But we tend to forget that element of things, and we're very much focused now upon a fascinating technology. The fascination, you see, is an undercurrent here, but we've allowed ourselves to be seduced by the technology we create, which is driven in large part by the market narrative. Because we don't just invent technology, we invent technology to make money, yes?
Well, yes, and also some of that money also is in terms information in a certain sense. And you use these words, you say, today we do not seek information, it confronts us. And because of that, that's where I think the wisdom falls out. We are mistaking oftentimes information, the ease of access, all of those things in play, like you said, the 52-inch screen, we're replacing that as if we have it, we don't need wisdom. And wisdom, by the way, is so different from information, whether we go after it or it confronts us. That's what you're also trying to bring back. And as a neuroscientist, you see that our brains have not lost the power of that wisdom. It is there in
You just
abundance.
have to educate it. I mean, it's a little bit like if you want to get stronger, you go to the gym, yes? Well, if you'd like to get a little wisdom, it's good to go to the mental gym. But you can't just get that from Wikipedia by stitching bits of paragraphs together. You have to think about it. And so the book is really a call to think about what we really are. That's the first part of the book. And knowing who we are, our habits, our choice, how do we make choices? How does the market narrative change the way in which we make choices? And then the second part of the book says, if you understand that, you can figure out how to live. And it's not that complicated, but it does take a little bit of thinking. It takes a little concentration. And when we have built a society where we're running from pillar to post all the time, and most of us are cutting down on our sleep because we have to get that stuff done at work, etc., etc. To what end, we're not sure. The fact is that we then end up with a frenetic life, and we don't have reflective time at all. In that circumstance, many people find themselves extremely frustrated. They get the anxiety and depression is much, much higher, etc., etc. And so you end up with a society which is hobbling along rather than running along smoothly.
Doctor, one of the things, though, that I it's sort of a theme that runs through much of what I do is, it's one thing though to understand this, as you say. We have the frontal lobe power to understand it. Where the challenge comes in that I know you state in this book is, how do we take that knowledge and literally transform it so that it gets imbued within our own cells. It becomes part of us, because I find that step, the knowledge isn't even the hardest step. It's the knowledge, as you say, we know how to diet, we know how to do these things, we have the knowledge. How do we, though, get that to become part of our nature?
Well, you get it from people. You see that, you don't get that from technology. You cannot learn what you just described from a laptop. And so we need to get back into infusing the world with each other. So this is very important as to how you build the habitat, build the cities that we live in. 80% of people now live in cities. We're not living on the farm. The economic center of the family is no longer the same economic center of the village and the farm. It's out there. Most people go to work in order to do something else, yes? Unfortunately, that doesn't really help very much. What we've got to do is to somehow think, how does the city, for example, help us integrate with each other such that we have a really good time? Because human beings, believe it or not, are more fascinating than most of modern technology. We're in danger of forgetting that, I think.
Well, I think, I want to use your words. Let me just see if I can find it quickly. If not, I will just make it up and you'll have to fill it in. All right, I'm not going to find it see, technology is not that fast, no matter how you look at it. But you talk about the red and green lights, the passion, I'm going to have to find it. Hold on.
But you see, here we have...
Pleasure, pain and pleasure.
Yeah, okay.
There you go, pain and pleasure. The red and green lights that shape our behavior.
Right.
So we are seeking that pleasure at all times. That's what may be the driving force.
But my point is really that pleasure can be hijacked. I mean, you were explaining to me before we started the way in which now technology helps you because you consume these books. I mean, I'm amazed that you're able to read all the books of all the people who come on your show. That's amazing. But the technology helps you do that. But it's an adjunct. It's not you. And so the moments in this conversation that are real are when we are talking and I'm stimulating something in your head. You're very kind and gentle and go back to try and find my words, but you understand what I'm saying, and your words in itself then create the conversation. So my words, your words create the conversation. The technology enables us, but it doesn't replace us. And so in the book, for example, I have a whole chapter on education, and I talk about this old master I had when I was in grammar school, whose name was Mr. Wesson, and he was a tyrant, but he was a wonderful tyrant. You know, we all loved him, even though we were terrified of him. And you had to pay attention and had to write the date in his way. But he was funny and humorous. And so I don't know that I remember all the details of the physics he taught me, but I do remember him. And it was his ability to engage with the students which I remember. And that is what education is really all about. It's attachment. It's attachment to another person. So the way in which you have had this show now for 10, 15 years, I don't know, but it's an icon. And what you do is you bring ideas to the set for others to think about. And the product is really that, regardless of which book you're talking about, is that people go away and they think, well, maybe I should, even if I don't read the book, I should think about that particular subject. You are creating a public service. What you're doing it through, however, is conversation. It's between two human beings. It's not through an infomercial or something. It's actually a real live conversation. It's programmed through the technology of the television set or whatever it is, the laptop, but it's the conversation which is the essence. And that's what I think we've forgotten. Human society is human society, yes?
Doc, I couldn't have said it better myself, and I couldn't thank you more for such a wonderful way to end our show, but our time is up. I am going to end with our conversation and your words. The nurturing of the well-tuned brain offers harmony and hope to each of us as individuals and to our collective enterprise. Thank you, Dr. Whybrow, for sharing your wisdom and helping us tune our brains.
Thank you very much, Barry.
It is my pleasure, and thank you all for joining us. Now, before Dr. Whybrow leaves, I'd like to leave you with these few more words from the well-tuned brain. The sense of wonder that feeds imagination is with each of us every day and in every moment. Given today's challenges, it is imperative that we willfully harness our imagination. I'm Barry Kibrick. Between self-interests and the collective good, we must harness our imagination and feed our sense of wonder. Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
Closed captioning for Between the Lines with Barry Kibrick is made possible by your generous contributions to KLCS Education Foundation. Thank you for your support. To connect with Barry, like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter at Barry Kibrick. And to contact Barry directly, watch past episodes of Between the Lines, and read his blog, visit us at barrykibrick.com.